Now with us, we appreciate it.
Better
You're
flow.
muted.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Were, yeah.
Nope. No, I wasn't. Nope.
That's
Can't
a
prove
fine.
it. Nope.
Put $1 in the tip jar, Derek Gunn.
Can't prove it. Nope. Nope.
We all saw it.
No,
What do you
didn't.
mean you can't prove it?
Can't prove it.
Get out of here.
Exist.
You're
Fake
like Dennis
news.
Rodman. If it didn't happen, it didn't happen, Carmen Electra. It didn't happen.
That's what I'm saying. Fake news.
Okay. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Derek Gunn, Rob Ellis, Sports Take. EJ saw it. We're going to bring him on right now to prove it. EJ Smith covers the Eagles for the Philadelphia Inquirer. EJ, you saw it.
This is what we like to call plausible deniability. All right.
Yes, exactly right.
I plead the fifth. Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. Okay. You're lucky EJ's nice. Okay. Oh, man. EJ, good to have you back on the show, man. I hope you're doing well. Appreciate it. Let me start with this one. What are you going to be focused in on most tonight? What's got your eye? What is the one thing you say, all right, I want to see how this guy looks, or I want to see what this, blah, blah, blah. What is it for you you're going to be honed in on?
Yeah, well, it's going to start with, like, ironically, the guys who don't play. You know, like when I get to the stadium, there are going to be guys who are working out. Like, you know, the starters kind of go through like a pregame workout before the game. And like, you know, that's going to be instructive. You know, some of these guys who, because, you know, there's so many positions on the Eagles defense, particularly that like, you know, day one starters like aren't really established yet. So if a guy like Zach Cunningham or a guy like Justin Evans or Terrell Edmonds, if those guys don't play, you know, that kind of tells you a little bit more about their standing going into cutdown day on Tuesday. Once you get to the game, though, I'm really curious to see, you know, some of these positions that there are log jams kind of on the roster bubble. You know, the young edge rushers, Patrick Johnson and Kyron Johnson. You know, Janarius Robinson's another guy. Like, I want to see if one of those guys stands out. And then backup offensive line, you know, it's one of the most important positions on the team. You know, it's a position that the Eagles obviously put a lot of stock into. You know, they usually carry 9 or 10 guys on the roster. This year, you know, going through it, they're really only like 6, maybe 7 guys that you would say are like locks, you know, guys who you expect to be, you know, on the 53-man roster next week. You know, there's a lot of guys in the mix, you know, Jack Driscoll, Sua Opeta, Dennis Kelly. So I want to see, you know, Josh Still's another guy. I want to see if one of those guys really stands out tonight to see kind of like if somebody can kind of give that little bit of a push to their stock, you know, going into cutdown day. Because, yeah, there are kind of like, you know, there's always like your locks, and then you've got, you know, my colleague Jimmy Kempski will call them near locks, you know, guys who are like, you know, who are in a really good spot going into this game. But, you know, there are like a handful of spots that are still up for grabs even after camp. So, and especially with like the veteran guys, you know, like Terrell Edmonds and Justin Evans, like, you know, those guys are like, you know, guys who I could see them being cut, you know, or I could see them starting week 1. You know, it's one of those weird things where, you know, there's kind of a lot of turnover at those spots. So that's kind of what I'll be looking for during the game.
Hey, EJ, let's address the elephant in the room here, i.e. Marcus Mariota. We hear tonight that he might play a series or 2 or a quarter at the most. This fan base has fallen out of love with him so quick, and the man hasn't seen a significant snap. Do you think it's in the organization's best interest to shield him away? Because you know the boos are going to rain down his first incompletion. Is it best to shield him away from from what could happen tonight and just let the Tanner McKee just go? Because you know what's going to happen after tonight. It's going to be the backup quarterback controversy blowing up.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to get initiated into Philadelphia at some point, right? I mean, he's been in the league a long time. I don't think he's really played in a town as intense as Philly before, but he's been in the league long enough where I think he's going to have to hear the boos at some point. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely, he has not had a good preseason. Training camp, he's looked pretty much exactly the same. He's had some moments with his legs, and he has had a couple of throws in the last week or two where it almost looks like he's turning the corner. It's like, all right, maybe he's starting to come together. And then he'll like sail one over Grant Calcaterra's head by 10 yards like he did against the Browns. So, you know, I still think that, you know, the talks of like unseating him as the backup quarterback are a little early. You know, I think that Tanner McKee is kind of listen, the kid can play. You know, he's proven that much, but it has been against vanilla defenses filled with backups. I think, you know, suggesting that he could do this against starting defenses with defensive coordinators trying to throw him off, it's a little premature. But yeah, I mean, the way that Mariota's looked is definitely concerning. I mean, like, I almost think that they can just like RPO the defense to death with Mariota. He's been doing that his whole career. You know, it dates back to Oregon. But yeah, his drop back passing has been definitely like a concern. If he's in a game and they're down by 2 scores, like I don't see him bringing them back. So definitely not what you expected from Mariota. But yeah, I think it is good for him to get a little bit of time tonight. Just kind of try to will him to have his last series be a positive one, so that he can get some confidence going into the regular season.
Well, I guess then I'll jump on this then, EJ. Derek and I have been pretty steadfast that you better just hope he looks better, because I don't see a move coming. Do you? I mean, I know people, they'll throw around the Matt Ryans of the world, and now everybody's Trey Lance, whatever. Do you see the Eagles doing something like that, or are they going to just kind of ride?
I think they kind of have to ride with him because of the structure of his contract. It's a $5 million deal with $3 million in incentives. I was on the over the cap the other day because, listen, it's a valid question. The way that he's played, it's like, could they move off of him? And it would be like, I think it's like between $3 and $5 million against the cap and dead money. So I mean, it's just it is what it is. They're going to be stuck with him, and I do think that there's a chance that just more time in the system, and again, like, curtailing the system to what he's good at, that they'll be able to get serviceable play out of him. And I think, like the conversation around McKee is more about, like, next year they won't be looking at the Marcus Mariotas of the world in free agency, because they have a guy in-house that I think can be a good backup quarterback. But yeah, for this year, I think the money is just too prohibitive to try and, move off of his deal. And, you can't subject McKee to waivers, I wouldn't think, at this point, with how well he's played. So, even if they were to try and make Mariota the third quarterback, you don't want to carry 4 on the roster. So I think that they're pretty set at quarterback. I think Mariota's play is definitely, again, made it a valid question. But yeah, I think that they just don't have, like, the financial flexibility to move off of him.
Do you really want to see Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, these guys in the game tonight? Because these are all guys who are basically going to be looking for the want-ass and they come next Tuesday.
Yeah, no, I think we've seen enough of those guys, especially Jalen Carter. I mean, Nolan Smith is already, dinged up. I think I don't think you're going to see him, but, even Jalen Carter, honestly, the play he had against the Ravens, that's all you needed to see. It's like, all right, we'll see you week 1. Because I think he's going to have a big role on this team. Fletch doesn't want to be out there for 80-90% of the snaps, and it's not in his best interest to be playing all those early downs and everything like that too. You want him fresh, and I think that Jalen Carter is going to have a big role. So, maybe they get him out there for a series just to kind of get his feet wet a little bit more, but I think you've seen what you need to see from that guy in particular. If we're talking Sidney Brown or Tyler Steen, like, yeah, I think those guys could use the reps. But I think Jalen Carter, he's proven that he is, what he was advertised to be. So, yeah, I don't think you'll see any of the first-round guys.
EJ, concern level for the shoulder with Nolan Smith. How real is this thing? Because, I worry that it's the same one that he had the surgery on in college.
Yeah, it's interesting because, he said he's fine, but of course he's going to say that. I mean, I don't have like a great level of concern about it, but I think that we are going to get to a point here, like, probably in a week or two, where if he's not practicing, then this might need to be something that, like, we keep an eye on. Right now, I think, you take him at his word that he's fine. But again, like, of course he's going to say, oh, I'm fine. I mean, he's wired that way. He could have, like, his arm could be hanging off and he'd say, oh, I'm going back out there, but I think the fact that, like, the team let him back out after the game, he had during the game, like, he came back out from the locker room and, like, he didn't come back in the game, but he was on the sideline and he seemed fine. So I think that suggests that it's not a severe thing. It's not a serious injury, but yeah, I mean, I was a little surprised that he didn't come back to practice last week just because, again, when guys tell you, oh yeah, I'm good, like, you usually can take him at his word. But I think with Nolan, again, I mean, he could have a pretty serious injury and still be like, oh, I'm fine. Trust me, I'm going back out.
He's a character, man, isn't he?
Yeah,
he is different.
It's really like they found, like, the next generation of BG and Fletch with Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith. Like, both of them are wired very similarly to those guys, especially Nolan and BG. I mean, it's, like, unbelievable. Like, he's just instant energy and he doesn't turn it off. It's not like he does this when the cameras are on. Like, when you have a normal conversation with him, he's exactly that way. And D-Gun, this, like, that's how BG is too. So, it's really interesting. Like, that kind of, like, next generation of defensive linemen, definitely seems like they're kind of going for the same type of archetype of, like, a, bubbly defensive end and then a defensive tackle that, is kind of, like, a little bit quieter, a little, but dominant on the field, kind of lets their play do the talking a little bit more. So
is there one player tonight that is going to play that you really want to hone in on to get evaluation of, and especially get a chance to talk to after they play tonight?
Yeah, I would say like Jack Driscoll and Sua Opeta are two guys like, they've been around for a long time, and I think they both have a good chance of making the roster. Especially the Eagles need depth at guard. Tyler Steen has kind of been, at both spots, and Dennis Kelly's, I think he struggled at guard more than he struggled at tackle. So that guard depth is going to be important. I think that Driscoll and Opeta have had good moments. They've had down moments. Obviously, Josh Sills really struggled in the preseason game, and he's kind of like, new to like kind of getting back to football, not as acclimated. So, I'm really going to be watching like the backup interior linemen tonight. And yeah, definitely want to talk to them after and kind of get a sense of like how they feel camp went for them, what their confidence level is. Because again, like I'm used to the Eagles carrying like 9 or 10 offensive linemen. And when you look at it right now, it really is. It's like there's like 6 guys, it's the 5 starters and it's Tyler Steen. And then everybody else is kind of like, could they sneak Dennis Kelly onto the practice squad as a veteran and, have him as a call up? And, then it's Jack Driscoll, where's he fit? And, because Tyler Steen can kind of play at that tackle spot, and he's probably also the first guy up at guard. So, yeah, I think they have a lot to figure out at those spots. I'm not saying they're going to be in trouble at those spots, but they still have a lot of figuring out to do.
EJ, compare, contrast last camp / preseason from Hurts to this one.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because, like, I was on record this time last year talking about how I just don't think Jalen Hurts is a practice player. He's a super talented guy, but I think that the off-schedule nature of his game didn't really translate to practice. This year, he shut me up. Like, my goodness, he has been unbelievable in practice. I don't want to like throw out a lofty comparison here, but like honestly, it's very similar. Like I remember when the Patriots came here for joint practices a few years ago, and when you watch Tom Brady, the ball doesn't hit the floor, and like he's the type of guy you hear stories about how surgical he is in practice, and so like it's just precision, right? And like that's been Jalen this summer. He has been so like polished as a passer that it was surprising when he struggled against the Browns in a joint practice. Like it was shocking that like there were incompletions and, miscues with the receivers because it has become, there's not to parrot him here, but like it's become the standard for him to be so sharp. Again, I think Jalen could have been, ho-hum, whatever, average during camp, and nobody would have been concerned about it. But, he came in, and I think he really has kind of taken it to another level, which is really encouraging. I don't think that anybody thought that Jalen was going to be like a one-year flash-in-the-pan MVP-type player. Obviously, like, Eagles fans will remember with Carson Wentz, like that does happen sometimes. Quarterbacks do kind of have these, this hot year and then they kind of come back and struggle. I think Jalen's personality kind of shielded against that a little bit more, the work ethic that he has. And, I think, you'll hear in the Eagles building a lot, like he'll reach whatever his potential is. He's going to reach it because of his work ethic and the way that he's wired. And I mean, he has been really, really sharp in camp to the point where, I think that he's going to be an MVP candidate again this year. I think the offense is going to be at a high level. I mean, my goodness, him and A.J. Brown were unbelievable last year, unguardable at times. And this summer, they've looked better than they did last summer. There are plays in camp where it's like, James Bradbury was in great coverage, literally nothing that he could have done. Jalen Hurts just put it in the perfect spot, and A.J. Brown just went up and got it. And the same thing's been going on with Devontae Smith. And, he's been finding Dallas Goedert on the run. It's been a really impressive camp, probably the best quarterback performance I've seen in my 5 years on the beat.
EJ, we were debating this a few weeks ago on this show when we were talking about what does Jalen need to improve on. And I said, to me, Jalen can play the exact game he played in 2022, and it will be good enough to get this team back to a Super Bowl if everything falls into place. You're there every day. Do you see anything that he's improved on or needs to improve on to make himself and the team that much better?
Yeah, honestly, like I think he seems like he's better as a runner. He says that he's hasn't lost any weight, but he's trimmed, he's lost fat and gained muscle basically. I'd say the thing that has stood out to me, and obviously it's going to really come during games when it's live, but he seems like he's better against the blitz. That was one thing that he struggled a little bit with last year, early in the year, and it's like teams were like, well, we got to try something against this guy, so we might as well blitz him. And, he had his moments, and I think the framework of the offense was such that there weren't always hot reads and, there weren't always like a check down for him. Because with Jalen, like he's his own check down. He doesn't want to, throw it to the running back. He just wants to make something happen with his feet. But I think you've seen him target running backs more this training camp. I think you've seen him just processing at a higher level. You know, when he sees a blitz, because you always hear that about the great quarterbacks, right? Like, you can't blitz them because they've seen it before, and the second you blitz them, they're just going to throw it right where the blitzer came from. I think you're starting to see more of that from Jalen, just as he gets more experience in the offense. And I think that that's like huge, because I mean, at some point it's like, well, what can you even do against this Eagles offense? You can't. You can't play man because they got the talent at wide receiver. You really can't play zone because, you know, you're just going to get gashed by RPOs and, you know, slant routes from A.J. Brown. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, you can't blitz him because Jalen's just going to process it, you know, faster than you can get to him. And, you know, you can't just sit back and let them do what they want either. So at some point you're just going to have, you know, it's one of those situations where you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I think that's what this offense's potential is to kind of be this, like, you know, unstoppable force that can just, you know, win games, even if the defense takes a step back, which I think, you know, if you look at the personnel on defense, you know, I think Sean Desai has done some interesting things during camp, but I do think that there's a chance that they take a step back just because of the personnel differences. I think the offense is going to have to stay elite, and I think the training camp, you know, indicates that they probably will.
If you could point to one thing, EJ, that would look different defensively, just schematically, what would it be under Sean as opposed to Jonathan Gannon?
I think creativity is the word I would use. You know, like, I think that, you know, Gannon's scheme was literally like, we're just going to keep the look the same every single time and, you know, kind of stick to what they're good at. And I think that with Desai, you're seeing a willingness to kind of try guys in different positions. You know, we've seen Terrell Edmonds kind of line up at safety and then kind of as like a pseudo linebacker. You know, we've seen more single high safeties in general, you know, more safeties in the box with somebody over the top. And I think maybe the biggest thing that will be a difference this year, other than, like, I think Sean Desai will blitz a little bit more, which I'm sure Eagles fans will be thrilled about. You know, we've seen a lot of blitzes in training camp, but I also think that you're going to see more press coverage. You know, I think you're going to see cornerbacks at the line of scrimmage trying to challenge guys, you know, trying not giving free releases as much as they did last year. So yeah, I think that in general, we've just kind of seen more diversity in the looks from the defense. You know, you've seen James Bradbury lining up in the slot. That's something that intrigues me because, you know, the Eagles are going to play Darren Waller twice. They're going to play Travis Kelce. You know, they're going to play George Kittle. They're going to need, you know, a tight end stopper at times. And I think, you know, putting your most physical, most talented cornerback, you know, on those guys, I think that's an interesting thing to do that you didn't really see as much with Gannon. You know, they had CJ Gardner-Johnson last year, and obviously that helps. But, you know, I think that you are just seeing a little bit more, like I said, creativity, a little bit more diversity in the looks. Even like the fronts, you know, like you'll see kind of like exotic fronts, you know, weird fronts where you got guys kind of lined up in strange places. And, you know, just I think that there's just going to be a little bit more variety in the picture that opposing offenses see. I think they're going to be a little bit more thrown off at times with what they're seeing pre-snap or what it changes to, you know, right after the snap.
EJ, Terrell Edmonds has been relatively quiet all training camp, preseason games. Who's the starting safety opposite Blankenship?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's one of the things that I'm going to be watching out for tonight because, like, I think Terrell Edmonds has a place on the team because he's played some linebacker now, he's played some safety. But honestly, like, if you ask me right now, I probably would say Sidney Brown and Reed Blankenship. You know, I think Reed Blankenship has been so good during training camp. I mean, if he were a third-round pick, I think people would be talking about him as if he were the long-term answer at the position. You know, a hit, like, if he'd be like, oh, they hit on that draft pick. You know, like they got a 5-year starter because he's just always where he's supposed to be. You know, he makes plays on the ball, and he's tough. You know, I think that he's at least, like, I feel really good about him being a competent starting safety. And then with Sidney Brown, like, you know, he's kind of had like a turbulent training camp just in the sense, like, he's been in with the 3s and then he's been in with the 1s and he kind of went back down with the 2s, but he's getting first team snaps. And I know the team is really bullish on him. You know, they drafted him to play. So even if it's not quite week 1, I think that by the end of the season, for sure, you're going to see Blankenship and Sidney Brown on the back end. I could see it being week 1. You know, I think that those two players complement each other. I think that there is a chance that, like, those two guys are just your guys, you know, for 5-10 years, you know, and I know that I might be getting a little ahead of myself, but, you know, I think Blankenship is just a great player. I think that he kind of the draft pedigree works against him and people kind of doubt that he can, you know, hold that job. But I mean, everything that we've seen from him during training camp suggests that he is a starting caliber player for this defense. And then with Sidney Brown, I think he's got a lot of ability. You know, he plays with his hair on fire. He's like he's one of those guys that sets the edge for your whole team, you know, sets the intensity. And that's like no small feat for a rookie, man. Like that's an impressive thing to do, you know, against the Browns. You know, the coaching staff tells them, like, the intensity wasn't good enough yesterday. You guys need to come out and, you know, set the tone. and he goes and lays out a running back on a Reed Blankenship interception. I think that's like, that says something about the type of guy that he is. I think there is a chance that that's going to get him in trouble at times. He's going to put himself in bad situations because he's over aggressive. In college, he had a lot of missed tackles, and it's kind of like a double-edged sword because it's like, well, he's flying around with his with his hair on fire, and he's getting to a lot of tackles, but he's not always getting the guy on the ground. So I think he's going to be one of those players where his big plays are going to make him a fan favorite, and his not so big plays are going to make him a player that fans just kind of wish that they could get that out of him. But I think he is a really intriguing player, and yeah, I do think he's in the mix to start week 1.
EJ, and the answer maybe we won't know until it gets real, but from what you've watched at practice, at the joint practices, preseason games, how smooth has it been with the new coordinators in terms of getting the plays in? The play clock not being down to 1 second, that kind of stuff. How is that? I know that's something Nick's talked about a lot, but how is it in your estimation?
Yeah, so they practiced at the link a couple of times, I think, to work on this, the logistics of it. Offensively, I would say you wouldn't have noticed that there was a different coordinator. I think some of the players would tell you that too. I think the scheme has stayed mostly the same. I think Brian Johnson's going to have his imprint on things, but it's not a drastic change. I'd say defensively, there were moments in camp where you could tell that they were kind of going through the growing pains of a new coordinator. Whether it was just organization wise, during the link practice, I think Desai sent out the twos, or I think he sent out the starters, and they were like, no, this was supposed to be a drill where you sent out the twos. So I think there have been a couple of moments like that, a couple of hiccups there. And just in general, I think the Eagles defense kind of, came along during camp. I think early on the offense was just really, had the advantage, which isn't normal for camp. Usually defense has the advantage starting off, but defense learned a new scheme, offense kind of in a similar scheme. I guess that kind of helps explain it. And, just Jalen Hurts playing at a high level. But yeah, I would say that defensively they've come along. I haven't noticed as much during the last few practices, but there were definitely a couple of hiccups, early in camp and during the middle of camp on the defensive side. But like I said, I think they got that stuff ironed out.
I think the backup tight end position is somewhat intriguing also. Calcaterra and Stoll are the incumbents, but where does this Dan Arnold fit into this? I've been saying off and on all season that he could emerge as your number 2 tight end, which means not so much as a pass catcher, but they'd like to use a lot of 12 personnel. He could be that extra blocker, which means he might get more reps than Stoll and Calcaterra.
Yeah, he's had a pretty quiet camp, but I think you're right. I think that Stoll was kind of considered that blocking tight end last year, but I wouldn't say that he was that's not his calling card. And Calcaterra, he's made strides as a blocker, but that's not his natural thing.
Right.
And I've always been, and I'll throw Tyree Jackson in there too, because Calcaterra is kind of your receiving tight end, but Tyree Jackson has some actual some real upside as a receiving tight end because of his size and athleticism. Now, Tyree Jackson started camp really well and kind of cooled off. I'd say that Dan Arnold has had a pretty quiet camp too, but I think you're right. I think that there's a chance that just the value that he brings as an inline tight end, because they don't want Dallas Goedert doing that as much. There are times where he needs to do it because he can do it, and it's a part of the what makes the offense so hard to prepare against is the fact that when he's in line, he could be one of the best top blocking tight ends in the league, but he also can go out on a play action fake and catch a deep pass. But at the same time, Dallas Goedert will be the first one to tell you, he doesn't always want to be blocking. He does it because he has to. So, I think that there is some real value in that. And that's something, admittedly that we don't notice, how well a tight end is blocking as much in camp as we do how many passes they're going to catch. Even a guy like me who tries to watch the offensive line and tries to make sure I'm, making note of, what's going on up front, that's not as, flashy as the guys who make a lot of catches. So I think he's in the mix. I'm curious to see, especially with a guy like Britton Covey currently injured, if they try and go light at receiver and heavy at tight end, especially if they don't have a lot of offensive linemen, that they need to get onto the 53. So I think there's a chance that they go heavy at that position and then, figure it out, in week 1.
EJ, who's returning punts? Who's returning kicks in your estimation?
Well, I would usually say Britton Covey. I know fans are not a huge fan of him because his upside, as a returner isn't quite as high as some of the other guys across the league. But honestly, I think with the Eagles, especially with where their offense is at, they just want a guy who's going to catch the ball every time. And, I've watched enough of the punt return drills to tell you, Britton Covey, his comfortability catching punts is just beyond anyone else's. They do this drill where you have to throw the ball, you hold a ball and they punt it to you. And right as you're catching the punt, you have to throw the other ball up in the air, catch the punt, and then catch the ball you threw up in the air. It's like a juggling drill. And it's like the most funny thing, because it's like NFL players, man, like they're very coordinated, very athletic guys. But when they do this drill, like they look like any of us trying to do this thing. Like, they really struggle with it, except for Covey. Covey can do it. He's like, he's just so comfortable back there doing it. So if he were healthy, I would say Covey. Now that he's a little banged up, he's got a hamstring injury. Olamide Zaccheaus is a guy who's done it before. He's got some juice as a returner. I think he could be the punt returner. And then as far as kick returns go, I think the Boston Scott, he's a guy who I have as like a near lock. I expect him to be on the team. If he's back there, I think, he's shown that he can do it enough. Again, like with kick returns, I think the most important thing this year with the rule changes is like you need a guy who's going to be very like cool and collected when teams squib, because I think that more and more teams are just going to say, we don't want to give you the touchback. We're just going to squib it. And like, I think you're going to need a guy like Boston who's kind of like quick on his feet and comfortable back there. So, I think the Eagles value security in those situations more than like return upside. And those are the guys I think kind of offer the most security.
All right, EJ, I want to get under Rob's skin just a little bit.
Don't do it. Now. Can you not do it?
Oh, I got to do this. This is the moment I've been waiting for. All right, EJ, I want you to fill in the blanks on this statement. Okay. Sipos is the Eagles punter for 2023, or I'm going to I'm trying to throw Rob a bone here, or the Eagles punter of 2023 is not on the roster yet.
I would say the Eagles punter for 2023 is not on the roster.
Yes.
Yet. Yeah. And maybe this is more my own opinion, because I do think that the team is probably higher on Sipos than I am or than most people are. But I mean, like, his rookie season, he struggled into December, and like he just got worse and worse. He was terrible in the playoff game. And then last year he struggled in the Super Bowl. And it's like, how many times do you need to see this guy tail off at the end of the year to realize like he could cost you a game when it matters the most, So I kind of feel like, I think they brought in Ty Zentner hoping that he would push Sipos, and he really struggled. He just wasn't like actually competition for Sipos, which is honestly saying something. But I do think that like waiver wire punter, door number 3, I think that will be something I'm keeping an eye on, come next week.
Just made my day, EJ.
Yeah, all right, sorry, Deegan.
last one for me. How would you rank the NFC East and how you see it, playing out?
Yeah, so I think the Eagles are pretty clearly the favorite. And then I would say the Cowboys are number 2. I kind of don't buy the Giants as much. I think that Brian Daboll is a good coach, but I just think like organizationally, like what they did in the offseason, I think they really put a ceiling on what they can be as a team. I think Daniel Jones is like a middle of the road quarterback. And we've kind of seen that those guys have, again, a ceiling. And, if you're going to be a team built around a running back, that's going to limit your ceiling. So I would say that the Giants are number 3. And then Washington, I think they've got some intriguing players. And, I think that Eric Bieniemy is going to help, bring some interesting things to that offense. But I'd say that they're probably number 4. And like, I know there's a lot of dialogue about like the Eagles and the Cowboys. Are they closer than people think? Honestly, like to me, like the Cowboys are a good regular season team. They're a team I think can get double-digit wins. Although, and I think they're kind of at the end of this era, this generation that they kind of have a lot of guys who are kind of not really like, secured past this year. I think they'll be a decent regular season team. I could see them splitting with the Eagles in the regular season, but like when the games really matter, I think they've just shown us too many times that they're not really the type of team that kind of rises to that occasion. So I have my predictions coming out in a couple of weeks. I'm going to have the Eagles winning the division. I think that's kind of how it kind of lays out for me.
All right. You can follow him on Twitter/X at EJSmith94. Does an awesome job covering the Birds for the Inquirer. He is a Temple man as well, so that makes him.
Yeah, I got to get a Temple flag back here.
Come on, man. You see what's going on? You got to make that happen.
And just so you guys know, it is confirmed. Mariota will only play a series tonight.
Yeah, series, and then we get a lot of McKee for sure.
Yeah, they're going to try so hard to get him, like just get him a couple completions and get him out of there, make him
high percentage throws. I would think is what you're going to see in that series. EJ, thanks, man. We appreciate you giving us a couple minutes. Man.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yep,
appreciate it. All right,
you got it. That's EJ Smith of the Philadelphia Inquirer, right there. Good stuff, Gunner. Good stuff.
Absolutely.
Let's get a timeout. We're going to come back and we're going to look at the odds, not from a betting perspective, but just get an understanding of what the thought process is with the national people in terms of where they think the Eagles are. Winning the Super Bowl, winning the NFC, winning the NFC East.
Okay.
We'll jump over to the AFC as well. We'll look at the MVP race. We'll do all those things when we come back. Don't go anywhere. That's Derek Gunn. I'm Rob Ellis. We are Sports Take, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network. All right, let's talk about Jim Murray and Principal Financial Group, because knowing who to trust, finding that right person that you can count on, that you can put your faith in, your hard-earned money with, it's hard. And finding that right person can be a real challenge. I found that right person, and I want you to be turned on to that right person as well. That's Jim Murray and Principal Financial Group. Whether it's retirement planning, 401k review, insurance review, you might have a small business and you need help getting your employee benefits off the ground. That's another resource that Jim can help you with. I have entrusted my IRA, my 401k rollovers with Jim, and I couldn't be any happier. You will be too. Give him a call. 610-996-4751. That's 610-996-4751. You could also email him as well. Murray, Murray.Jim@principal.com. That's Murray.Jim